Thank you, Nishtha. I would also like to thank our speakers, my internal team, and of course, Ambassador Mudgal sir, Professor P.V. Rao, Captain Parmar sir, and Radhika ma'am will be joining soon. So I'm making the first presentation probably to just elaborate on how the UDA framework fits into the effective realization of the SAGAR vision. I'll be covering under these heads. First and foremost, when we talk about the underwater domain awareness, we must keep in mind the tropical conditions. The Cold War era was the beginning of development of these technologies, but this was for the temperate waters. But today, the larger deployment of the underwater domain awareness is in the tropical waters. So that differentiation has to be understood and has to be prioritized whenever we want to talk about the UDA framework. And even the SAGAR vision is very, very important in terms of its maritime connection. So the Indo-Pacific strategic space is what is now being prioritized by the global community. And by definition, the Indo-Pacific strategic space is the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So again, the tropical waters become very, very critical here. Now, when we talk about the Indian Ocean region, it is in the middle of the tropical waters. And what is important here is India's position in the Indian Ocean is very, very unique. I mean, you can see the peninsula jetting out, and no other country in the region will have as much geopolitical and geostrategic relevance compared to India. So India has no choice but to play a leadership role, and which is aptly mentioned in the SAGAR vision. Now, India in the 21st century, it is very important for us to take note. I mean, SAGAR vision is one, but to support the SAGAR vision, the government has also announced many other projects. So to support that also, we need to ensure that the underwater domain awareness becomes a key priority, which is yet to be given that priority. So the Sagar Mala, inland water transport, transboundary river management, multimodal transport, digital transformation, and Atmanirbharta, everything requires capacity and capability building at a different scale. Now, if we just focus on the SAGAR vision itself, by definition, as aptly mentioned by the Hon'ble Prime Minister in his Shangri-La dialogue keynotes address, the security concerns in the IOR because of the political volatility, blue economic possibilities. I mean, being the tropical condition, there is huge opportunity for economic growth. But also we must realize that we are a 10,000-year-old civilization, so there is ample amount of traditional knowledge and practices which needs to be mapped in the present context. And then India's aspiration to play the leadership role in the Indian Ocean region is also. So here again, I mean, diplomatically, if we can extend the capacity and capability building in the region, that will automatically give us the leadership role that we desire. And more recently, the Honorable Prime Minister has also announced the Mahasagar again back in Mauritius. So all this also gives us the direction that we need to focus on the maritime and the ocean in a very different way. Now, for any strategic purpose, people, economy, nature becomes the triple bottom line, as they say. I mean, the livelihood aspects, the coastal and riverine communities have to be given the kind of priority. Otherwise, many times they become victim of any so-called development in the maritime domain. And inclusive governance, so that they are part of the whole development process. Economic growth, of course, I mean, there will be no reason if there is no economic growth. I mean, today, energy security and huge amount of undersea resources are available and needs to be exploited. But if we don't develop indigenous capabilities, we'll become victims of the extra-regional powers trying to manipulate us. And also, of course, the sustainability and the climate change aspect. And most important in the underwater domain is the acoustic habitat degradation that happens because of the anthropogenic activities that we carry out. Now, let us focus on the challenges. Now, we have a huge demographic challenge in this part of the world. I mean, not just in India, in the entire subcontinent. I mean, almost 25% of humanity resides in this part of the world. But if we are not able to give meaningful engagement to the aspirational young population and the young professionals, we will stare at a huge internal security issue also. So it is very important that we channelize their energy into something more constructive. Secondly, the diversity of indigenous community. I mean, on one end, we may claim that this is a big problem in terms of scaling up, but there's a huge amount of knowledge that resides, and how to map that using the modern digital transformation or digital technology to scale up this whole effort is something we need to look at. And here again, underwater domain awareness will play a very, very important role. Now, in terms of sediment transport, I mean, we are looking at huge amount of water transport in this region, and that's the most effective and cheapest, or we could say the most efficient. But the problem here is that unique sediment transport pattern creates a huge amount of navigational challenges. Now, if we don't do a thorough sediment transport study, we will not be able to channelize the navigability in these water bodies. I mean, whether it is coastal transportation or inland water transport. So, because we constantly keep on going to the Western countries or Western nations for supporting us in this, but they don't understand the tropical waters. So we have to understand the UDA in a very different perspective. How to make it sustainable? I mean, everybody is rushing towards a lot of opportunity that we see, but how to keep it sustainable is again very important, and UDA will play an important part. Climate change risk assessment or even resilience. I mean, 75% of the earth is water, and out of that 90% I would say is below the surface. So without the UDA, how are we going to drive climate change? I mean, how do we study climate change is also something. I mean, the entire modeling and simulation has to originate from the underwater domain awareness. So there is a huge opportunity there. But there is a huge challenge of suboptimal sonar performance. I mean, the sonar performance degrades by almost 60% compared to the temperate waters where they were designed. So there's a huge challenge which need to be kept in mind, and they have to be prioritized. The second is the opportunity. I mean, whether it is Sagar Mala, again, here the navigability is a huge challenge. But we are constantly looking towards dredging as a de facto solution, not looking at sediment transport study. So underwater domain awareness becomes a very important aspect here. Inland water transport, again, I mean, if you talk about the national waterway number 1 and 2, Ganga and the Brahmaputra, the siltation is a huge challenge, I mean, because of the tropical condition. So how to keep these waters navigable throughout the year is a big challenge. So again, here the sediment transport study will become important, and excessive dredging will only make these projects unviable. Deep ocean mission, I mean, International Seabed Authority is also facing a huge challenge in terms of, giving the exploitation permission. I think there is a lot more work to be done in terms of underwater domain awareness and the capability for sustainable exploitation. Fisheries and aquaculture, again, here we see fisheries and aquaculture has become unsustainable because of wrong practices. So again, how to navigate this in a sustainable manner, a lot of underwater domain awareness will be required. My colleague will present, I mean, some of the papers are dedicated to each one of them that I'm talking about. Strategic security, of course, is a very big concern, and huge amount of, I mean, after the 2611, MDA maritime domain awareness got a lot of importance, but I think underwater domain awareness needs far more prioritizing. Gati Shakti is an important initiative where the effort is to coordinate among the various stakeholders. So underwater domain awareness should also become an integral part of the Gati Shakti initiative, so that then information can be shared and much more coherence can be brought into the whole effort. And of course, in the freshwater system, again, because of high siltation, our water bodies have become very, very, they have depleted the storage capability. So that's a huge problem, how to make them more sustainable, and even it impinges on the dam security. So this is the framework that we talk about, the underwater domain awareness framework. If you look at the 4 sides of the cube, it represents the 4 stakeholders that we talked about. But the core will be the acoustic capacity and capability building. Unless we are able to generate enough information below what is happening below the water, we will not be able to drive it. And if you look at the vertical construct, a lot of sensing, analysis, and regulation is required. So each of those smaller cubes will define those specific applications and the specific areas that need to be focused. And even from a demographic aspect also, our young professionals and students can pick up projects which will make them far more employable. And it will define, even for the government also, it will allow them to channelize the resources and the funding in a more nuanced way. And this we have divided into various specific problems like underwater radiated noise. It's important for the Navy in terms of acoustic stealth, but it's also important for the conservation, ecological conservation activists, also acoustic habitat degradation. The same technology or the capability can be used by various stakeholders like ship designers and ship builders also can use this capability. And similarly, sediment management. Again, whether it is water resource management, inland water transport, even for deploying assets in the water bodies, I mean, whether it is for defense or even other applications. So this is the digital transformation. I mean, I think the only way forward is digital transformation. So you can see a map which we have built using modeling and simulation in the Indian Ocean region for underwater noise. So this kind of heat map, I mean, spatiotemporal mapping will help the policymakers to drive this in a very, very nuanced manner. So modeling and simulation, I mean, if you, in the conventional way, people will say that we need to deploy sensors and do, but how many sensors can we deploy in our EZ is something. So modeling and simulation is the only way forward, and my colleague will be discussing this. So to see, to understand, and to share is what we talk about in terms of acoustic capacity building. So to see is this hardware, the sensor and the platform which will carry the sensor. To understand is the data analytics that will be required. And here the customization will be possible. And to share is the is real-time sharing of the information in a user-friendly format for the user. And in terms of human resource, high-end data analyst, domain knowledge specialist who will interpret the data, and then the field deployment. The field deployment specialist is where the coastal and the riverine communities can be involved. And it will be such a beautiful thing to have these people part of the digital transformation. So outreach, engage, sustain is the way forward, according to me. I mean, we need to do a massive sensitization. A lot of people don't even understand the nuances. And once they understand, then more customized engagement, and then how to sustain it through policy and technology intervention. And I would say, I mean, in terms of center of excellence, I mean, the 5 pillars, I mean, research, innovation, skilling, and knowledge, and also policy. These all 5 pillars need to be driven together. So I think that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Nishtha. Back to you.